12:23 a.m. on October 6, 2025, two bright fireballs tore through the night sky over Saki Airfield in Novorivka on Crimea's western coast. That single visual was the opening timestamp of an operation designed to do far more than scare the night. It was the opening note in a deliberately phased, intelligence-driven strike meant to paralyze Russia's southern logistics network by destroying the Fedosia maritime oil terminal and related nodes that kept armored formations, air assets, and naval strike platforms fueled and moving. What unfolded that night was not a spontaneous attack. It was a choreography of expendable platforms, timing electronic warfare, and precision terminal guidance executed to exploit the defenders' doctrinal reactions. The operation began with a swarm designed explicitly to be seen and to be shot at. 63 unmanned aerial vehicles and 3 missile drones approached Crimea from multiple vectors, the majority deliberately low-cost, small payload decoys whose purpose was economic and informational rather than destructive. 48 of those were mass-produced, high-speed decoy UAVs with simple composite bodies intended to absorb radar energy and be consumed. Modified commercial drones and repurposed one-way platforms, such as the aging UJ-22, also formed part of the opening wave. Their tasks were simple: saturate Russian air defenses, force the expenditure of interceptors, and most critically, make the Russian integrated air defense system reveal itself in real time. As the swarming packages arrived over the peninsula, the Russian IADS commander on duty, the lieutenant general in charge of Crimea's integrated air defense network, issued the predictable order: engage all targets. S-400 batteries, Panzer S-1 systems, and Tor M-1 units launched interceptors that lit the night sky. Each interceptor was precisely the result Ukraine wanted: an expensive American or Russian-made missile wasted on a cheap disposable platform, and every launch generated exploitable SIGINT that mapped the defender's engagement radar frequencies, reaction times, and geolocations. Every kill was, strategically, a loss for Russia. Every fired missile gave Ukraine a clearer picture of where and how to strike next. With the lower tier and mid-tier defenses busy burning missiles on decoys, the corridors opened for the operation's main hunters. From a covert launch area near Odessa, the deadliest elements began a roughly 186.4-mile transit toward Crimea. The main strike mix included 2 heavy Peklo missile drones fitted with approximately 264.6-pound warheads each, 4 UJ-26 Bober one-way drones carrying roughly 110.2-pound warheads apiece, and 4 AQ-400 scythe platforms carrying about 66.1 pounds each. Additional AQ-400s launched closer to the Kherson front to converge on the target simultaneously. The planners exploited differences in speed and range as a timing tool. Bobers cruising at roughly 124.3 miles per hour required nearly 2 hours of transit. Peklo missiles capable of about 435.0 miles per hour covered the same distance in roughly 35 to 40 minutes. By launching the slower heavy payload Bobers first and the fast Peklos later, Ukrainian controllers synchronized arrival windows so that disparate systems converged over objective points within seconds of one another. Approach tactics were chosen to defeat line-of-sight radars. The strike packages advanced in extremely low sea-skimming profiles, roughly 98 to 164 feet above the surface. At those heights, long-range surveillance radars like the 91 and 6E Big Bird, tied to S-400 complexes, were effectively blind because of the curvature of the Earth. As they skirted the radar horizon, a KUC, a 4 electronic warfare system, established an SS denial bubble over the approach corridor intended to blind satellite navigation. Standard GPS-guided munitions would be vulnerable in that environment, but the attacking platforms were prepared. Their flight computers rejected corrupted GNSS data and switched to inertial navigation systems using high-precision ring laser gyroscopes and accelerometers. That resilient INS guidance allowed the drones to maintain course with millimeter-level precision while flying blind, turning an electronic attack meant to halt them into an anticipated and solved problem. Before the terminal itself was struck, supporting interdiction was required to sever the Fedosia distribution artery and remove critical node defenses. One early surgical strike targeted the Ivazovskaya rail junction, the rail artery that moved fuel from the terminal toward frontline units. 3 AQ-400 scythe UAVs with 66.1-pound penetrating warheads struck that node. One hit the station's administrative building and signaling center, degrading command and control, while the other 2 disabled the track switches and points, physically severing the line. The attack did not produce a large conflagration, but it achieved its objective: rail throughput was interrupted, and bulk distribution to the south was denied. Concurrently, a separate package struck an ammunition depot tied to the 18th Combined Arms Army, a depot that supplied forces on the Kherson and Zaporizhia fronts. That package consisted of 4 UG-26 Bobers armed with their heavier 110.2-pound warheads and a single Piccolo missile. The Bobers breached perimeter defenses at low altitude and penetrated into storage buildings, while the Piccolo used imaging terminal tied to preloaded satellite imagery to aim at the densest stacks of munitions. What followed was catastrophic. Sympathetic detonations of hundreds of tons of artillery shells, multiple launch rockets, and various air defense rounds produced an apocalyptic fireball and a seismic shockwave that registered for kilometers. In one night, a depot that had sustained frontline formations was effectively vaporized. The operation's spearhead then focused on the Fedosia maritime oil terminal itself, the strategic heart of Crimea's fuel supply. The strike package assigned to that objective consisted of 10 platforms, 4 AQ-400 sides with 66.1-pound warheads, 4 UJ-26 Bobers with 110.2-pound warheads, and 2 Piccolo missiles carrying 264.6-pound warheads. The aim points were the terminal's storage tanks, thick-walled, armored vessels whose destruction would generate secondary catastrophic fires and chain reactions among adjacent tanks. As the package reached terminal proximity, lower-tier systems such as Panzer S-1 engaged. Reports indicate a Panzer battery locked onto an approaching Bober and launched a 57 E-6 interceptor, a missile capable of velocities near 2,907.0 miles per hour. For the Panzer operator, this engagement likely registered as successful. The target picture suggested a solved threat. That moment, however, was exploited. The radar warning receiver on a surviving Bober detected the lock and triggered an onboard mini-electronic warfare that degraded the Panzer's targeting picture. Simultaneously, multiple new targets appeared on the defender's tactical display. The logic and priority algorithms faltered under the sudden proliferation of returns. The result was attrition among the attackers. 1 Scythe and 2 Bobers were lost, but enough platforms penetrated to execute the terminal's destruction sequence. The strike on the storage tanks was deliberately sequenced to defeat armor and induce sympathetic ignition. An AQ-400 Scythe first acted as a penetrator against the first tank to rip or weaken its outer armor. Within a second Scythe and a Piccolo with its 264.6-pound warhead struck the same aim point, saturating the structure until it failed and ignited. A near-identical set of sequential impacts destroyed a second tank and triggered a massive secondary explosion. The heat, blast, and resulting fragmentation that undermined nearby tanks until a third tank failed through sympathetic heating and shock. In total, the terminal received in excess of 1,102.3 pounds of precisely delivered high explosives across primary aim points. The chain reaction produced a catastrophic inferno. By approximately 2:30 a.m., the fire at Fedosia was visible from dozens of miles away and subsequently confirmed by thermal satellite imagery. Initially, official narratives attempted plausible deniability. Industrial accident, static electricity, human error. Those explanations were rapidly undermined by 3 converging lines of evidence. Rushed communications within Russian Ministry of Defense. Channels acknowledging strikes. International news agencies reporting a major fire in Theodosia. And hard thermal and optical satellite data recording multiple large sustained fires. Together, the signals made clear this was a kinetic strike, not an industrial mishap. The operational and strategic impacts were immediate and systemic. Fedosia was not a minor storage farm. The terminal had a cited capacity of about 551 million pounds of product when full, equivalent to roughly 275,578 short tons. That inventory supplied diesel for tank units, jet fuel for attack and air support aircraft, and heavier marine fuels that sustain cruise missile ranges and naval operations. A single day's disruption at that hub could reduce the operational of a tank brigade, constrain sortie rates for air regiments, and force alterations to fleet patrol and strike planning. The attack also demonstrated the dual-use vulnerability that modern logistics present. Pipelines and storage that fuel armored formations also sustain civilian life. The strike turned an already fragile fuel situation in Crimea into a collapse. Even before the strike, roughly half of the peninsula's gas stations were reported out of fuel. After the terminal was rendered unusable, Fuel rationing began to affect both civilians and occupying forces. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, and logistical trucks began to sit idle at depots, movement schedules were disrupted, and the rhythm of frontline operations slowed. For Crimea's civilian population, the strike transformed war from an abstract to a concrete fact. Long gas lines, rising food prices, and persistent air raid sirens created an atmosphere of panic and material shortage. Beyond logistics, the operation carried reputational effects. Crimea had for years been promoted in official messaging as heavily defended and nearly impregnable. The strike shattered that narrative. Airspace closures in multiple Russian regions and reported power outages in cities such as Belgorod signaled to the domestic audience that the conflict's reach had expanded. The physical burning of tanks visible from dozens of miles and satellite-confirmed fires sent a stark message that no single-layered defense is infallible when doctrine, cost asymmetry, and cunning are combined. Analytically, the operation exposed a core strategic truth about modern asymmetric warfare. Economic attrition of expensive defensive systems with cheap offensive tools can reorder cost equations and decision cycles. A single S-400 interceptor missile costs orders of magnitude more than the tens of thousands of dollars it takes to produce an expendable, one-way UAV. By forcing the defender to exhaust interceptors, the attacker converts quantity into an informational commodity. Every radar emission and missile launch is intelligence. Technically, the operation also illustrated how GNSS denial is a solvable problem when attack systems are architected with INS resilience and high-fidelity terminal guidance. The KUCA, a four-jamming bubble, attempted to blind satellite navigation, but tightly integrated inertial systems and preloaded imaging allowed Peklo missiles to find the most concentrated ammunition stacks, and allowed Bobers and Scythes to deliver warheads on target even while GPS was denied. The combination of modern avionics, ring laser gyros, and terminal imaging guidance compensated for jamming and converted an intended defensive advantage into an operational vulnerability for the defender. The night's attacks were not an isolated tactical success. They were a doctrinal case study. The 18th Army's ammunition stocks were catastrophically reduced, rail distribution was severed at critical points, and the peninsula's primary maritime fuel hub was consumed by fire. The economic attrition on Russian missile stocks and the political shock of seeing nominally secure infrastructure burning in Crimea will force a reassessment of air defense doctrine and resource allocation. The operation demonstrated that cheap, expendable unmanned systems integrated with electronic warfare and imaging terminal guidance can produce strategic effects that previously required expensive platforms or massed strikes. By morning, multiple confirmation streams had converged. Official Russian messages that quietly acknowledged engagements, independent international reporting, and satellite thermal data all pointed to the same conclusion. The operation achieved its principal aims: degrade logistics, destroy stockpiles, and force a doctrinal and material reevaluation of how layered defenses counter low-cost, high-information attack packages. For the forces that night, success was not measured in the number of UAVs recovered, but in the disruption caused, and the targets reached. For the defenders, success would have required 100% interception of these heterogeneous threats, a standard they did not meet. This operation will be studied as a template for integrating deception, attrition economics, resilient guidance, and precise terminal effects. It is a modern demonstration of asymmetric warfare philosophy where expendability, timing, and information exploitation are the decisive weapons. The targets named in this account: Seki, Kacha, the 18th Army Depot, Ivazovskaya Rail Junction, and above all, the Feodosia Maritime Oil Terminal, are real. Their attacks occurred at the times described, and the operational narrative here is drawn from technical analysis of official and open-source signals, social imagery, and satellite confirmations. What happened in Crimea on the night of October 6th was not merely a tactical raid, it was a strategic stroke that rewrote calculus across the southern theater.